The lights of Los Angeles shimmered like dreams floating in the night air. Cars hummed down the streets, billboards flashed faces of stars, and neon reflections danced on rain-slicked pavement. Amid the chaos, a young Filipino boy stood at the corner of the boulevard, staring up at a glowing sign that read "America's Got Talent." His hands clutched an old, silver microphone, the kind Elvis Presley once used, and his dark eyes gleamed with nervous hope. He wasn't just here to perform, he was here to keep a legend alive. He took a slow breath, glancing at the crowd around him. Dancers stretching, magicians rehearsing, singers humming under their breath. Each one chasing the same impossible dream. Yet there was something different about him. His clothes were simple, black jacket, white shirt, neatly tucked. But there was a quiet fire in his posture, like an old soul living in a young boy's frame. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, worn photograph. Elvis Presley, smiling with that unmistakable charm. The edges were frayed, but the meaning behind it was timeless. The boy whispered softly, "For you, Elvis," and tucked it back close to his heart. He had grown up in a cramped neighborhood in Manila, where the nights were filled with the hum of fans and the sound of old music playing from a neighbor's radio. His father used to hum along to Elvis songs while fixing a bicycle, and his mother would laugh and say, "Someday, you'll sing like him." And he did. Every night in the quiet of his small room he would imitate the king. Not just the voice but the soul. He watched grainy videos on YouTube, studied the way Elvis moved, how his voice carried sadness and power all at once. The boy wasn't trying to copy him, he was trying to understand him. To carry forward that same spirit that once changed the world. Now standing backstage surrounded by the muffled cheers from the audience, he felt his heart pounding in his chest. The stage manager called his name. "You're up next." The boy looked down at his shoes, took a final deep breath and stepped toward the light. Each step echoed like destiny calling. When he finally walked out onto the massive AGT stage, the noise of the crowd faded into a low hum. The bright lights nearly blinded him, but he kept his eyes focused on the judges' table. Simon Cowell sat in the middle, arms folded, a look of curiosity and skepticism in his eyes. Heidi and Sophia smiled politely, not knowing what to expect. How could they? Just a boy from the Philippines with no band, no flash. Just a dream and a voice. He adjusted the microphone stand, cleared his throat, and spoke softly. "Good evening. I'm from the Philippines and tonight, I want to sing for the man who taught me what music really means, Elvis Presley." The crowd gave a polite clap. A few chuckles echoed, as if the idea of a teenager singing Elvis felt old-fashioned in today's world. But the boy didn't flinch, he simply nodded at the sound technician. The track began. The first few notes of "Can't Help Falling in Love" floated through the hall. That slow, familiar guitar melody that always seemed to stop time. The boy closed his eyes and began to sing. His voice came out low, rich, and hauntingly beautiful. Not an imitation, not a parody, but a rebirth. It carried warmth, pain, and an honesty that reached straight into people's hearts. The first line drew quiet gasps from the audience. The second line silenced the entire room. Simon leaned forward, eyebrows rising, the look of disbelief spreading across his face. He wasn't just hearing a contestant, he was hearing something almost supernatural. Every syllable the boy sang felt soaked in emotion. His voice trembled just slightly on the high notes. Not from fear, but from sincerity. The crowd sat frozen, phones forgotten, eyes locked on him. When he reached the chorus, the lights dimmed to a deep gold hue, and a camera zoomed in close to his face. You could see the tears building in his eyes, the way his lips trembled when he whispered, "Take my hand, take my whole life too." Somewhere in the audience an old man stood up clutching his chest. A woman wiped her tears. Even Sofia Vergara whispered under her breath, "Sounds just like him." But it wasn't just the sound. It was the soul. For that brief, magical moment, it felt like Elvis Presley had stepped back into the world through this Filipino boy's voice. As he sang the final line, his gaze lifted upward. "For you, Elvis," he whispered softly before the music faded, and then silence. For a long, breathtaking moment, nobody moved. The crowd didn't even breathe. Then, as if time snapped back into motion, the audience erupted into applause. People jumped to their feet, the judges rose in unison. The camera caught Simon's face, his jaw clenched, his eyes wet. He looked down, then up again, shaking his head in disbelief. The boy stood frozen, overwhelmed by the standing ovation. Tears slipped down his cheeks. This was everything he had dreamed of since he was a child. Not fame, not money, but connection. To make the world feel what he had always felt when listening to Elvis. Simon leaned forward toward his microphone, his voice softer than usual, almost trembling. "Yo, you brought Elvis back tonight," he said. "I've been doing this show for years and I've never seen anything quite like this." The boy's lip quivered as he smiled faintly. "Thank you, sir. the crowd began chanting, "Golden buzzer! Golden buzzer!" The noise swelled, echoing across the walls of the theater. Simon sat back for a second thinking, then looked toward the boy again. Something changed in his expression. The kind of emotion that's rare to see in him. Slowly, deliberately, he stood up and pressed the golden buzzer. The moment the button clicked, a burst of gold exploded from above. Confetti rained down like magic dust, swirling around the stage. The lights turned warm and radiant, painting the boy in gold. He looked up, his hands trembling, as glittering flakes fell across his hair and shoulders. For him, it wasn't just confetti. It was the physical shape of his dream finally coming true. The music swelled into a grand orchestral remix of "Can't Help Falling in Love." The judges clapped, the audience screamed, and yet he stood there frozen, eyes closed, soaking in the moment. In his mind, he could almost hear Elvis's voice, whispering from somewhere far away, "Thank you, kid." The boy dropped to his knees, both hands covering his face as tears streamed down. This was more than a performance. It was a connection between generations, a bridge between Manila and Memphis, between the living and the legend. The judges joined him on stage, hugging him, cheering. Sophia wiped her eyes, Heidi blew him a kiss, and Simon, the man who almost never cries, brushed away a tear before anyone could notice. He smiled softly and said, "The king would be proud." As the camera zoomed out, the entire stage was glowing. The boy stood there, golden dust still floating around him, the crowd chanting his name. He looked toward the heavens, one hand over his heart, and whispered again, "For you, Elvis." In that moment, time stood still. There was no difference between past and present, no ocean between the Philippines and America. There was just one voice, one dream, and one timeless message. That music never dies, it only finds new hearts to live in. The broadcast replayed across screens worldwide that night. Social media flooded with clips of the Filipino Elvis. People from around the world commented, "He gave me chills. It felt like Elvis was alive again. This boy has something special." News outlets wrote headlines about the moment Simon Cowell cried on AGT. But for the boy, sitting quietly in his hotel room later that night, none of that mattered. He placed the old photo of Elvis on the table beside his golden buzzer trophy and whispered softly, "We did it." He stared out the window, the lights of the city blinking like stars, and smiled. Because somewhere deep down, he knew this wasn't just his story anymore. It was Elvis's legacy, reborn through a voice from the other side of the world. And for one unforgettable night on that grand American stage, Elvis truly lived again.